Kaido stood in our workshop, his fingers tracing the outline of the missing door. Where once there had been a portal to another world, or at least another workshop, now there was only smooth wood and the faintest imprint of hinges. Rin, ever the voice of reason, and I must admit, my personal angel when it comes to keeping me from jumping into trouble with both paws, crossed her arms. So, let's say your mother is still alive. Why would she leave a door beneath our floorboards? Kaido's ears, both the human ones and the new cat-like ones, perked forward, as if listening for an answer that wasn't spoken aloud. She left clues, he said softly, for those who know where to look. I gasped dramatically, because when isn't dramatic gasping appropriate? And clapped my hands together. Ooh, like what? A treasure map, a riddle, a mysterious cat-shaped key. Rin shot me a glare that could have melted steel, but Kaido smirked, just slightly. More like memories, he said, and the way to piece them together. A silence fell over us, thick with unspoken questions. Then Rin, ever practical, said, "All right, let's start at the beginning." Kaido nodded and reached into his coat, where of course he had been hiding something because of course this story would involve hidden things. This time it was a small, ornate locket. He opened it to reveal, not a photo but a keyhole. Rin blinked, Kaido-san. I leaned in, squinting at the locket. It was identical to the one he'd used on his cattail, except this one had a keyhole shaped like a crescent moon. Let me guess, I said, this is your other key. Kaido nodded. My mother gave it to me when I was younger. She said it would open doors, but not the kind you'd expect. I reached out slowly, my fingers hovering just above the locket. Because if there's one thing about keys, it's that they beg to be picked up. Rin sighed, Momo. But I ignored her as usual and carefully pried open the locket's clasp. Inside was nothing. Just a smooth, empty space where a key should have been. Kaido's expression darkened slightly, just for a second, but then he said, "We need to find the other half." Rin raised an eyebrow. "And you think it's in your mother's workshop?" Kaido hesitated, then nodded. "I do." A beat of silence passed. Then I clapped my hands together, because sometimes a moment of gravity calls for loud enthusiasm. "All right, let's go on an adventure." Rin groaned so loudly that Mr. Whiskers, perched on her bookshelf, startled and knocked over a stack of blueprints with his tail. Kaido chuckled softly, a sound that was still new to him, but one I found myself rather enjoying. Well, our journey to Kaido's mother's workshop began with us standing in the middle of the muse, staring at a map that Rin had drawn on the back of an old receipt. "I think it's this way," she said, pointing to a district called the Spire, a place where the buildings loomed taller than most, their facades adorned with gears and clockwork designs. "But I'm not sure how we're getting there." I squinted at the map. Maybe we should just ask someone for directions." Rin groaned, "Momo." Kaido, standing a respectful distance away, though his ears were very perked forward, said, "I've heard of the Spire before, but no one I know lives there anymore." A silence fell over us, one of those moments where the weight of the past presses down like a storm cloud. Then Rin sighed, long and dramatic, because she loves being dramatic when she's annoyed with me. "All right, we'll take the back alleys to avoid the main streets, it's faster." I nodded enthusiastically, because nothing says adventure like navigating narrow alleys while trying not to step on something that might be a rat, or, in my case, definitely stepping on it anyway. As we walked, Kaido's ears twitched slightly more than usual, as if they were listening for something. I couldn't help but notice how he moved. Quiet, precise, like someone who had spent too much time studying how others walked. You've been practicing your stealth walk, haven't you? I asked, grinning. He shot me a look that was part amusement and part exasperation, but he didn't deny it. Rin rolled her eyes. Momo. We continued through the back alleys of Kagari, where the buildings leaned in like secrets waiting to be told. The air smelled of rain, which, as you know, happens a lot here, and old paper, because this city was full of stories whether they wanted to be heard or not. Then, just as we reached the edge of the spire, Kaido stopped suddenly. His ears flattened against his head, human and cattle-like, and he froze, as if listening for something only he could hear. Rin and I exchanged glances. Kaido-san, you okay? He swallowed hard, then whispered, I think we're being followed. A chill ran down my spine, because when isn't a chill appropriate in a story like this? Then from the shadows behind us came the sound of laughter. Not human, not exactly, but something that was both familiar and wrong. Rin's tail flicked with agitation, because she, unlike me, can sense danger before it happens. I gasped dramatically, because when isn't dramatic gasping appropriate? And turned around slowly, as if I were in one of those old horror stories where the heroine knows something is watching her, but doesn't look directly at it because that's what gets her killed. But there was no one there, just an alleyway bathed in flickering lantern light and the faintest hint of a melody, like someone playing a flute out of tune. Then Kaido's ears perked up, all of them, and his voice came out rough with something I couldn't name. It's coming from the rooftops. Rin groaned, Momo. I swallowed hard, because sometimes, being brave means not panicking until you've had a moment to think about it. Then, because I am who I am, I said, well, we can't very well ignore it if we want to find Kaido's mother's workshop, can we? Rin sighed, you're impossible. Kaido chuckled softly, a sound that was still new and untested on him, but his eyes were sharp with determination. Let's go, he said. And just like that, our adventure took a very interesting turn. Because if there's one thing about following mysterious melodies in dark alleys, it's that you never know what or who might be waiting for you on the rooftops. Well, we climbed onto the rooftops of Kagari with all the grace of, well, 3 people who have never been on rooftops before. Rin was, as usual, the most graceful because she, unlike me, knows how to walk without stepping on things that might be sharp. Kaido moved with quiet precision, his cat ears twitching slightly as he scanned the shadows. And I, of course, ended up tripping over my own feet, twice, and then having to apologize profusely, because politeness is important, even when you're in the middle of an adventure. The melody we were following was soft, a flute's call that echoed through the narrow gaps between buildings. It led us to a rooftop bathed in moonlight, where the air smelled of damp stone and something faintly sweet like cherry blossoms. And there, sitting on the edge of the roof, was a figure. But this wasn't just any figure, it was her. A woman with hair like silver threads woven through raven black locks. Her eyes were sharp, her posture elegant, but there was something in them that made my chest tighten with recognition. Kaido gasped softly and took a step forward, then paused as if afraid to shatter the moment. Rin's ears flattened against her head, a sure sign she was not happy about this, but she said nothing. She never does when she's truly annoyed. I, on the other hand, being who I am, said, Kaido-san, is that your mother? The woman, Kaido's mother, smiled faintly. Her lips curved just slightly, and for a moment I thought I saw Kaido in them. The same sharp angles, the same quiet strength. Hello, my son, she said, her voice like honey wrapped around a blade. I've been waiting for you. Kaido's breath hitched, just slightly, But then he stepped forward, his movements careful, like a man walking through a dream. Mother, he whispered. She tilted her head, studying him with those sharp eyes of hers. Then, softly, "You've changed." Kaido hesitated then, because he is who he is, he said. "I've been trying to find you." A silence fell between them, thick with years unspoken and questions left unanswered. Then the woman smiled, a smile that was both kind and knowing, and said, "And now, my son, we must talk." Well, the moment Kaido stepped closer to his mother, I saw it. The way their faces mirrored each other, the way his cat ears twitched in response to hers. Rin and I exchanged glances, one that was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Was this really Kaido's mother? Or had we been tricked by a mirage or ghost, or as Rin would say, my overactive imagination? But then the woman, Kaido's mother, reached out and brushed his cheek with her fingers. And for the first time in our journey together, Kaido didn't pull away. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing just slightly, as if this were a moment he'd waited years to experience. Rin sighed, long and dramatic, because she hates when people get emotional, but I saw the way her tail flicked with something like envy. I, being me, said, "So, this is your mother." Kaido's mother smiled just slightly and nodded. "Yes, child." I blinked rapidly, because when isn't blinking rapid appropriate in a moment like this? Nice to meet you. I'm Momo, Kaido-san's friend. She tilted her head, studying me with those sharp eyes of hers. Then, softly, "You're the one who modified his cattail." I perked up, because if there's one thing about stories like this, it's that the side characters get to have their moments too. "Guilty as charged," I said, grinning. Though I did try to tell Rin that we should have just stuck with whistling tales instead of singing ones, but she wouldn't listen. Rin shot me a glare that could have melted steel, because she hates when people mention her flaws, but Kaido's mother chuckled softly, a sound like wind through leaves. "Momo," Kaido said, grinning at his mother, because even in moments like this he can't resist teasing me. "Tell your partner that we're going to talk." I gasped dramatically, because when isn't dramatic gasping appropriate? And waved my hand toward Rin. "Oh, you mean her, sure thing." Rin groaned so loudly that a nearby cat startled and bolted into the shadows. Kaido's mother sighed, her shoulders relaxing slightly, as if this were all just another day for her, which I suppose it might have been. "You two should stay out of this," she said gently. "It's not safe." I perked up, because if there's one thing about stories like this, it's that the moments before danger strikes are always the most interesting. Rin, ever practical and ever annoyed with me, said, "Kaido-san's right, this is more than we bargained for." Kaido looked at his mother, then back at us, his expression a mix of determination and something like sadness. "I need you both to do one thing," he said softly. "Protect the key." A chill ran down my spine, because when isn't a chill appropriate in a story like this? Then Rin sighed, long and dramatic, because she hates when people ask for impossible things, but she nodded. "All right," she said, "we'll guard your key, but you're coming back to us, Kaido-san." Kaido's mother smiled faintly, just slightly, as if this were all just another day for her, which I suppose it might have been. "I will," he said. And with that, the two of them vanished into the shadows, a moment that was both bittersweet and very dramatic. Rin and I stood on the rooftop in silence, one of those moments where the weight of what's to come presses down like a storm cloud. Then Rin sighed, long and dramatic, because she hates when people leave her behind, and said, "Momo, we're so getting into trouble." I grinned, because if there's one thing about stories like this, it's that the real adventure is always just beginning. "What? To be continued.